This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and today I'm going to be testing Sailor Manyo Nekoyanagi in a variety of nib sizes. I've got a Pilot Extra Fine, a Pilot Fine, Jinhao Medium, a Nimacine 0.6 stub, and then an Anderson 1.1 and 1.5 stub. And I'm going to be writing on Tomoe River paper. And when I get done with this writing sample, I've already done some writing samples on Rhodia and on the ARC notebook paper. But let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm not going to have to switch nibs as much this time, just twice. And this is the the Pilot Extra Fine. And I would characterize this as scratchy. It's surprisingly readable, but I'm still experimenting with this extra fine nib to see what kind of inks. I'm kind of thinking more saturated inks are going to be the pretty much what you have to use with this extra fine nib. But this, I would consider this a watery ink, and it feels scratchy even on this Tomoe River paper. So the extra fine feels scratchy. Let's see how the fine nib feels. Substantially smoother. Yeah, very pleasant to use. Still a little not the ideal nib size for this type of ink, but very readable if you want both of these look like a pale lavender color. If that's in Sailor Haha, I would have considered it a powder blue. This is almost like a powder purple. Next, I've got the Jinhao with a medium nib. And now you might actually be able to see the colors that we're going to be seeing in this ink. The first two X's that I wiped away almost, completely disappeared. I'm seeing pink and blue basically in this, and I'm starting to see some interesting characteristics in this ink. When we get the other writing samples done, we'll go back and look. I need to give this time to dry. Next is the Nimacine with a 0.6 stub. It's a little bit drier than the medium. Let's see, and now I like to use this Nimacine to switch out nibs. You can see my I've been playing with this earlier. This is Sailor Haha, and this is Nekoyanagi that we're playing with right now. There are some similarities, but also some differences. I'm trying not to be as messy this time. There's Nekoyanagi that we're playing with right now. It's just really interesting. If I had some actual chromatography paper, this would be a fun ink to do a chromatography of. I'm looking forward to seeing some actual chromatographies of this ink. Okay, this should be the 1.1. Let's make sure. Yep. I think Anderson probably sources their nibs from the same place that Goulet does. So if you have a Goulet 1.1, I would say it would perform similar to this one. And I'm just going to pull this nib real quick and replace it with the 1.5 while this is drying. It's hard to pick up. And you can see it's starting to look in these wider nibs, instead of it looking more like a lavender ink, it's coming across to me more like a pink ink. It's a pink ink with a lavender halo. This is another really interesting ink to play with. And you notice it had the ink had a little trouble grabbing onto the paper here at the beginning. And I had some trouble like this with some other ink, with some other papers, and we'll talk about that in just a second. These watery inks I've mentioned before tend to bead up on certain slick papers, and sometimes, and it may have been because I've been resting my hand here, the oil from my hand may have made the paper especially slick right here, and the ink just didn't want to grab onto it. But let's take a look at this now that it's drying. In the smaller nibs, it looks like a pale purple ink. And in the medium nib, you start, if you know to look for it, you start to see, oh, there's something interesting happening here. And then the wider the nibs are, the more you see it's a pink with a lavender halo. And you can kind of see that here. The pink stays behind and you see blue. And I'm going to compare that to Sailor Haha. This is primarily a lavender ink, whereas this one came across more as a powder blue. And it's hard, you're not seeing all the interesting characteristics that I am in real life. My camera's just not picking up entirely everything that I see. On the Sailor Haha, there are more colors. This separates into more colors, and I want to show that on here. Sailor Haha is like purple and blue and green and yellow, whereas Nekoyanagi is primarily just purple and turquoise. And that's what I'm seeing here. Purple and actually, when it goes on the page, it's more pink and purple. Now, let's see. On my Staples paper, it just didn't perform well at all. In fact, these watery inks tend not to. They just feather a lot. They don't want to grab the paper in some spots, and in some spots it just soaked it up like a paper towel. On this X, the paper actually started melting a little bit. It just got so wet. So doesn't perform well on paper that's less than ideal for fountain pens. And I've got one other. This is Tomoe River paper in an old Hobonichi Weeks. It's got the cream colored paper, and I think you're able to see a little bit better how it separates into the two colors. And yeah, let me see. On the medium and the 0.6 stub, I'm able to see it in real life. It's a little bit more difficult to see. My camera's not picking it up. But on the fine and extra fine, it just looks like a pale purple. And that's it compared to Haha. Let me see. I wanted to show you on Rhodia. Rhodia, I'm seeing a little bit of the character in the stub nibs, but in the extra fine, fine, and medium, it just looks like a pale purple. And even in the 0.6 stub, I'm not seeing much color variation. In the stub nibs, I'm starting to see a hint of color variation, but on Rhodia paper, it tends to stay pretty flat. Sailor Haha looked like just a flat powder blue, and this is looking more like just a nice lavender color. But that's the second of the Sailor Manyo inks. These were the two that I think are getting the most attention because of the color variation. But I'm curious to see some of the others that are maybe more practical for everyday use. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.